The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com. There is a classic teaching story that comes from a lot of different traditions that basically has the same storyline. It's the story of a monastery where there was a huge amount of conflict, lots of jealousy, lots of pettiness, lots of people comparing themselves to each other, power struggles, that sort of thing. And in this story, the abbot or the vicar or the head monk doesn't really know what to do. So they call in a wise, aged, senior person in the tradition. And as the story goes, this very wizened person shows up, and they call the monastic community together. And this wise man looks out and just says a few words and then leaves. And what he says is that one among you will shortly be fully awakened, or one among you will be the newly risen Christ, or one among you will be a great saint, and then leaves. And as the story goes, the community is transformed, because either the individuals are thinking, well, that's got to be me, or they're thinking, well, I don't want to get the next Christ annoyed at me, so I better make sure I'm in good graces. And I love that story, because really the essence of the story is you never know who you're sitting next to. The truth is we all have this amazing potential to be fully alive, fully realized, if you will. And so does everyone around us. And we forget. For the next couple of weeks, we're going to make a little bit of a shift from sort of the emphasis on training and awareness through meditation to the complementary training, which is the training of the heart. And tonight I'd like to talk about kindness. And as usual, I try and touch on four main points. And the first being, and the phrase comes from a Sanskrit, but it's called Aditi Devo Brahma, which is literally translated as the guest is God. The practice of being kind to yourself, starting where it's the hardest, and recognizing what matters to you. What is the pathway for kindness for you? The third is the practice of being kind to others, of sensitizing yourself to others and taking on kindness as a practice. And the fourth, a little bit on what it means to be living with an intention to have an open heart. So there's a story from Tolstoy, which you may be familiar with this one. It's entitled Where Love Is, God Is. And it's the story of a cobbler who hears a voice in his sleep one night. The voice tells him that on the very next day, the Lord Jesus will visit him. And the next morning begins his work in a spirit of high expectation as he eagerly awaits the coming. But the only visitors he had that day were people in distress. First, there is an emaciated old beggar with a rattling tubercular cough. And the old cobbler takes him in, warms him by the fire, and gives him food. Next comes a half-frozen, thinly clad woman carrying her hungry baby in her arms. She needs food and clothing, and the old cobbler obliges. Then an old apple woman comes. She's terribly upset because a boy has tried to steal her apples. The cobbler knows the boy and is able to bring the two together and reconcile them. the day has not turned out as expected. But the cobbler has not forgotten the promise of the Lord's visit. And tired, he falls asleep in his chair and he hears the same voice from the previous night. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was sick and you ministered to me. This practice of Aditi Devo Brahma is the practice of whoever is in front of you, assuming this person is a manifestation of the divine. In the ashram where I lived for many years, we took that on as an active practice. And while it could be seen as a customer relations ploy, it was actually a very profound practice. Of course, not practiced perfectly, but to have that intent was quite profound for me. It would reframe how I would relate to people in my life. It can be a helpful way of remembering. We so easily get lost in our own story. When we feel the grip of fear or anxiety, we contract, and we forget our interconnectedness, or as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, our interbeingness. Or as the Dalai Lama once said, we all same. I love that line. We all same. And in fact, that very belief that we're separate is considered to be that initial break in belonging. In Sanskrit, it's referred to as avidya, or the wrong belief. That at some point, as we come into form, we believe that we're separate. We then start investing into the story of who we are as a separate being. Our aversions and attractions get longer and longer and longer, and with that comes an increasing fear of death. Because the more you've invested into who you are as a separate being, and you have to let it all go, there's terror associated with that. These are called the kleshas, and the practice of meditation or mindfulness is sometimes called dying while alive. Looking closely at your aversions and your attractions and seeing what's true. And ultimately, sensing into the question of who you truly and really are, beneath your story, beneath your preferences. And the practice of kindness becomes a way of bridging the gap between the separation between yourself and others. And so kindness begins probably at the very hardest place there is, which is yourself. Have you ever looked in the mirror at yourself and had a critical thought? You can raise your hand. Maybe better to say, have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, you look marvelous? Not quite so much. The lack of kindness that we have toward ourselves, it can range from just a chronic sense of not quite being enough to outright contempt. And we motivate ourselves through self-criticism. It's kind of a learned habit that we take on. I've noticed for myself and for most other people that the bar of expectations we set for ourselves is usually a little bit beyond what is reasonable. Have you noticed that in your life? That your to-do list is more than you ever really could get to, even if it was a really good day with high energy? What is that? Just that chronic expression of never quite enough. I know that as I've examined this for myself and with others, there's sometimes an inner fear or an inner tension that if I lower the bar, if I actually be kind toward myself, well then I'm just going to get lazy. I'll never get anything done. I'm just going to get complacent. most of us were motivated through criticism, through our primary caretakers, through our culture, a constant sense of correction. And so we take that on. We take that on ourselves. But at the fundamental base of it is the belief that there's something wrong with us, that we're not quite good enough. And while criticism can be a great motivation, the fear of failure, the fear of shame, it's a great motivator. Kindness is an interesting other kind of motivation. When we live without kindness, it is a very, very harsh and cold inner world. And kindness can be a way that helps us to loosen our binds. It's a healing salve for ourselves, or as my teacher Sokni Rinpoche says, it's the lubrication that helps you to let go. So a little 2-minute Zen pop quiz, if you will. If you could close your eyes. And you might, if you like, just to bring your hand to your belly or to your heart. And just sense, is it possible to offer a little kindness to yourself right now? Even for this evening, you brought yourself here for this time of slowing down and pausing. And just for the few rounds of breath. What does it feel like? Just to sense it's okay. You're doing fine. There is an inquiry which I have found very helpful. Just to reflect on this inquiry, just briefly. What is it like inside when there is no longer a problem to be solved? What if in this moment everything is already okay? And then if you like, you can deepen the breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I have found for myself that as I've explored the heart practices, there's been a kind of a profound retraining for myself. I think I'd shared before that my grandmother's name was Wilhelmina Augustina Schulholz, which might give you an idea of how important emotions were in my upbringing. The idea of softening to kindness, compassion, attention, and affection was more of a setup for some joke being played on me, I think, in my childhood. There's a certain vulnerability we experience when we allow ourselves to be undefended and to receive. And it really is a training. And as the saying goes, where the attention flows, the energy flows. That when you look toward the practice of kindness, and it is truly a practice, you begin to incline the mind in that direction. So I've gotten a lot out of the teaching around the 5 love languages, and I've shared this before, but I wanted to review it again because it's so helpful. That is, we tend to receive through certainly all 5 of these love languages, but 1 or 2 tend to be a little more right to that vulnerable point. And these are physical touch, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and words of affirmation. So I'd like to lead another little Zen pop quiz, if you would, just to close your eyes. And just a sense for yourself. Which of these ways of receiving kindness, affection, and love most resonates for you? Physical touch, having quality time, to receive gifts, to receive acts of service? Or do you most respond to hearing words of affirmation? And again, you can let your eyes open if you like. I found it so helpful to reflect on this, and I was having conversations with friends last night about this. And I was sort of asking people around the table, what do you most respond to? And someone said, presence. I really love presence. I said, you're the first person I've ever met who really loves to receive presents. And she said, no, it's presence with a C. But I found for myself, as I reflected on this, that part of my sort of survival strategy as a kid was to minimize my needs. At about 8 years old, I figured out if I minimize my needs, I won't be disappointed. So I focused on being very self-contained. And so for me, to receive acts of service, when my wife cooks a meal, there's something wonderful about that. It's almost a vulnerable place inside to actually have a need anticipated and met. And as I've talked with my wife, gifts mean nothing to her. I mean, she certainly likes all of them, but it's quality time. Having undisturbed, eyeball to eyeball quality time for her is very, very healing and quite profound for her. So when you reflect on those in your inner circle, it can be a very helpful reflection and a really great conversation to find out what is the love language of those around you. How can you more meet their needs? One fellow told me how he was constantly offering words of affirmation to his partner and just always talking about what he appreciated about his partner and all the great things his partner did for him. And it was only later that he realized that what his partner really responded to was touch. His partner was born in a very kind of a cold, non-touch family. And just having the arm on the shoulder or the touch on the back for his partner meant the world to him. And we tend to express our love for others as the way that we like to receive it. But when we can open up the neural network a little bit and find out what works for the other person, then we're really connecting. So another little Zen pop quiz, if you will. If you can bring into mind just one person in your inner circle, someone you're close to, someone you might want to, just express your kindness toward, your affection toward. And which of these 5 love languages do you sense would most resonate for them? And again, they're physical touch, gifts, quality time, acts of service, and words of affirmation. And if this person received that, what do you imagine it would feel like for them? And then again, when you're ready, you can let your eyes open, or you can remain with them closed if you like. When you take on kindness as a practice, it has a very powerful way of breaking the shell of separation between you and others. You recognize that there are others out there that are living and breathing and fighting their own battles. And every time you reach out, you're exploring our interconnectedness. The thing is, though, is that it's premature to blast your kindness out without including yourself. And it's so helpful to remember that the practice truly begins within, which is oftentimes the hardest place there is. So in your practice, just to take a few moments when you sit and meditate, and just offer the sense of, may I be well, may I be happy, may I feel safe, may I feel free from suffering, can be a very powerful way of priming the pump, offering friendship toward yourself. So with the intention to live from an open heart, we begin with self, of course, which is hardest. Sometimes it helps to prime the pump by thinking of someone that you have a more spontaneous love connection with. And I often recommend starting with a pet, because it's relatively easy to kind of get the pump going. I'd mentioned before, but in a month-long training that I had done, the first week we would do an hour for self, just reflecting on kindness towards self. Of course, what that does, it reveals all the intense self-criticism we have and so forth. The second week, you focus on the benefactor. And this is a beautiful practice of just reflecting on those who've been kind to you, those who truly want your success, those who care about you. And that can stretch back to ancestors and so forth. The third week, you select what's called a neutral person. And you consciously take this person on and offer them kindness. And what I found in this practice was so helpful. The instruction was to choose someone you felt no aversion toward, but no particular attraction. So I chose our retreat manager for the 80 of us for this month-long retreat, who struck me as a fine but unremarkable person. Just being honest here. I hope she's not listening. So for an hour a day, I would offer the phrases of loving kindness. May you be happy as I wish to be happy. May you feel safe from inner and outer harm as I wish to feel safe. May you feel peace. May you feel free from suffering. So an hour a day, just as part of my reflection. After the third day of that week, I was just sitting in the meditation hall and had my eyes open, and she walked in. And my heart just soared, and I just thought, my beloved has arrived. I was falling in love with the retreat manager. So where the attention goes, the energy flows. As they say in neuro-linguistic programming, if you want to fall in love with someone, and what happens when you fall in love with someone is you focus on what you like and you minimize what you don't like. And that moves you toward the attraction. And what they say is, when you fall out of love, or if you want to end a relationship, it's relatively simple. Focus on what you don't like and minimize what you do like. And inevitably, when a relationship begins to split, that's what happens. Someone goes, I'm going to start focusing on what I don't like more than what I do like, and then the separation begins. So we have control over our awareness. And kindness can become a very profound practice. Quite often, when I might be working with someone who's in conflict with a family member or a spouse, I'll ask them if they do a metta practice, if they do a loving kindness practice for the other. And most people are shocked at the idea. I mean, actually wish this person well? Are you kidding me? Of course, this is all tied into forgiveness and so forth, but the truth is, if someone is happy, they will do less harm. If someone feels safe, chances are they will naturally respond in a more generous way to life. If someone is feeling free from suffering, they're more available to life rather than being defended or acting out of some form of pain. And some of the most profound transformations in relationships occur by simply taking time to consciously wish the other person well. It can be kind of miraculous. There are times when I utterly forget the kindness practice, mostly when I'm on the Beltway, but I still try. And I believe it was last summer when I was just very inspired by the practices of generosity and kindness. And so I just thought, I want to more quickly respond to being a well-wisher of all. And one afternoon I was driving, it was very, very close to here, and I was coming down the hill, and there was a woman on a bicycle to my right in my car, and someone made a left-hand turn in front of us and ran right into her. She went right over the trunk and fell. And so I slowed down, and I saw there was no one really tending to her. So I'm normally a pretty private person, but I just pulled my car over, and I ran over, and I just sat down on the pavement with her and kind of held her head while all the yelling and cars and police and ambulance and no one was really paying any attention to her. And she had her eyes closed the whole time. So I was just telling her what was happening, just in my best meditation voice. Just sort of describing that, everything's going to be okay, and now the police are arriving, and they're figuring out what to do, and they're closing off traffic, and she was in a little bit of shock, but I could tell that she was responding to my voice. I was just sort of being a steady voice in her ear, and I kept waiting for someone to come over and say, get away from her, or we'll take it from here, but no one did. So I was with her for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and just sort of providing a narrative for her, and asking her name and asking her some simple things. At one point, the EMTs arrived and they were transferring her onto the shelter. So I just told her, okay, now you're going to be lifted up and you're going to be moved, and I wish you well. And she never opened her eyes, so we never made eye contact. And I tried to find in the police reports later to find out what happened to her, but I couldn't find it. I looked online for quite a while. And there's something about that experience as I reflect back on that. And part of it was the risk that I took just to make myself available for her in her suffering. And sort of the something very interesting about not having closure around it. But as I look back, it warms my heart just to know my intention was to be this healing, steady presence for her. And one of the interesting things, and I only realized this in retrospect, the Buddha talked about the heart practices such as generosity and kindness and compassion, that there are three beneficial qualities to it. One quality is the desire and intention to be kind. That has a wholesome quality to it, just to have the intention to be kind. The second is the act itself. The act of kindness itself is a moment of egolessness. It's a moment of interconnectedness. It's a moment of just pure presence. And the third element is looking back at the memory of being kind. And I didn't realize that until I was thinking of this talk, that whenever I think about this woman and my intention, it just fills my heart. And I think it's actually kind of cool that we had no completion. I have no idea who she is or what her name is, but just trusting that she's well. So there are classical phrases that are tied into the practice of loving kindness. The phrase of loving kindness is metta, M-E-T-T-A, and it comes from the root word of mita, which is the word for friend. So it's the act of cultivation of friendliness toward yourself and toward others. And what I've found is in the practice of metta, and you may be familiar with the phrases, there are classical phrases. May you be happy, may you know peace, may you feel safe, may you feel free from suffering. Actually, the classic phrases are may you be. Sylvia Boorstein, who some consider the queen of metta, she loves metta, she likes substituting the word feel. May you feel happy. May you feel safe. And I like that as well, because there's something immediate and visceral about it. The challenge with the metta practices, with the phrases, is they become quite mechanical. So you're just, may you feel free, may you feel happy, may you know peace. And I think of them as like playing jazz. When you offer the phrases, what you want to be doing is eliciting the feeling of it. I just posted a metta meditation I led on the last retreat, which offers some non-traditional practices of metta for the body. So you might like to play with that. But I think what we might do is just to close with the metta practice with the different phrases. And with the phrases, you can just let them sort of filter through. You can repeat them internally. You can look for the phrases that just resonate for you. And again, what you're looking for is something to guide you toward the feeling of kindness and compassion and joy. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You might just slowly lengthen the breath again. And on the out breath, let yourself relax and soften. And for a few rounds of breath, just lengthen the inhalation a little bit. On the out breath, relax and let go. In the practice of metta, or loving kindness, while you may be invoking the intention to feel happy, you may not feel happy. But you might just resonate or just sense the intention to increase your capacity for happiness and for safety and peace and freedom. And letting yourself respond to the following phrases. If these words don't resonate for you, feel free to make up your own. We begin by offering metta to self. May I feel happy. May I feel peace. May I feel safe from inner and outer harm. May I feel free from suffering. And bring into mind now, if you wish, someone who's you find it very easy to send appreciation and gratitude toward. It might be a friend, it might be an ancestor, it might be a pet. And offering the following phrases, either letting them pass through or repeating them internally or exploring the felt sense of it. May you feel happy just as I wish to feel happy. May you feel peace as I wish to feel peace. May you feel safe from inner and outer harm, just as I wish to feel safe. May you feel free from suffering, as I wish to feel free. Over these next few minutes, you might bring others to mind, and in your own way, offer these words or this quality of feeling to them. One aspect of this practice is to imagine ever-expanding circles. You might bring into mind those who are sharing this practice in this room, all these beings. May all these beings feel happy. May all these beings feel peace. May all these beings feel safe from inner and outer harm. May all these beings feel free. And you might imagine this intention like a bright light, like a light in the night sky, radiating in all directions to all beings without discrimination. And imagine this being extended out to all beings, all living things, those coming into form, those falling out of form. May all beings feel happy. May all beings feel peace. May all beings feel safe. May all beings feel free. And as you offer this out, sense if you can include yourself, this breath, each cell of the body. And then gently deepening the breath. You can let the eyes open. I recently got to hang out with a 6-month-old. And there's something about seeing how a baby relaxes when they're being held. When the baby feels held, there's a sense of something they can fall back into. And for many of us, and at different times, we don't feel like we're held, so we can't relax. And these practices of kindness have a way of holding ourselves and holding the world. And it could be a very profound practice.